The morning mist clung to the valleys of New Eden like a gentle mother's embrace, and 7-year-old Sarah Chen chased butterfly birds through the amber grass with the kind of pure joy that only children possess. Her laughter carried on the wind, a sound so innocent and beautiful that even the colony's hardened security chief, Marcus Rodriguez, found himself smiling as he watched from his patrol route. New Eden was humanity's newest colony, a garden world discovered just beyond the Outer Rim territories. For 3 years, the settlers had built something beautiful here. Farms that stretched to the horizon, schools where children learned under alien suns, and homes where families could watch double sunsets paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. It was paradise. And perhaps that should have been their first warning. The Zephyrian raid ships descended from the clouds like silver tears falling from heaven's eyes. They moved with the fluid grace that their species was known for, nearly invisible against the morning sky until it was far too late. The first the colonists knew of their presence was when the defensive grid went silent. Its operators found unconscious at their posts, with strange burn marks on their necks. Sarah was picking wildflowers near the settlement's edge when the shadows fell across her path. She looked up with curious brown eyes to see beings that resembled elongated humans, their skin a pale blue-white that seemed to shimmer in the morning light. Their faces were beautiful in an alien way, with large silver eyes that held depths like still water. They moved like dancers, each step perfectly placed, each gesture flowing into the next. "Hello, little human," one of them spoke, its voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Sarah tilted her head, still clutching her bouquet of purple flowers. "My mummy says I shouldn't talk to strangers," she said. But her voice held more curiosity than fear. In her young mind, these beautiful beings couldn't possibly mean harm. The Zephyrian who had spoken, Commander Veltar of the Hegemony's Collection Corps, felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries of raids across the galaxy. The human child's innocence was so pure, so untainted by the harsh realities of the universe, that it struck him like a physical blow. Her species was newly contacted, barely spacefaring, and yet there was something in her eyes that spoke of depths his people had forgotten. "We are not strangers, little flower," Veltar said, kneeling to her level. "We are collectors of beauty, and you are the most beautiful thing on this world." Sarah giggled, a sound like silver bells. "You talk funny. Are you from space?" Before Veltar could respond, the settlement's alarm finally began to wail. The sound cut through the morning air like a scream, and Sarah's eyes widened in sudden fear. In the distance, they could hear shouts and the distinctive whine of energy weapons. Marcus Rodriguez came running through the tall grass, his rifle raised and his face twisted with desperate fury. Behind him came Dr. Elizabeth Chen, Sarah's mother, her medical coat still stained with morning coffee and her eyes wild with maternal terror. "Sarah, get away from her!" Marcus shouted, but the Zephyrians moved like liquid lightning. In moments that seemed to stretch like eternity, the beautiful aliens surrounded the child with their flowing, dancer-like grace. "Stop!" Dr. Chen screamed, falling to her knees just meters away. "Please, she's just a baby. Take me instead." Veltar turned those deep silver eyes toward the human woman, and for a moment, something almost like regret flickered across his alien features. "Your offspring will not be harmed, human. She will know wonders beyond your primitive imagination. She will see the courts of the hegemony, witness the beauty of 1,000 worlds. She'll never see her home again," Marcus snarled, his finger tight on the trigger. "Let her go, or I'll paint these fields with whatever color your blood runs." The Zephyrian commander's beautiful face hardened like ice. "You mistake us for beings who can be threatened by your crude weapons, human. We are Zephyrians of the Hegemony's Collection Corps. We take what pleases us from the lesser species of this galaxy." Sarah looked between the aliens and her mother, her young mind struggling to understand why everyone looked so scared. "Mummy? What's happening?" "It's okay, baby," Dr. Chen whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Mummy loves you. No matter what happens, Mummy will always love you." The collection field activated with a sound like distant thunder. Sarah found herself encased in a shimmering bubble of energy that lifted her gently from the ground. She pressed her small hands against the barrier, her flowers scattered in the grass below. "Mummy!" she called out, and the sound broke something fundamental in Dr. Chen's heart. "We will return her when she has served her purpose," Veltar said, though he couldn't quite meet the mother's eyes. "Perhaps in a few decades, when she has learned proper appreciation for the galaxy's true beauty." Marcus fired his rifle, the plasma bolt striking the collection field and dispersing harmlessly in spirals of light. The Zephyrians began their flowing retreat toward their hidden ships, carrying their precious cargo with them. "You don't know what you're doing," Dr. Chen whispered, and there was something in her voice that made Veltar pause. "You don't understand what you're taking." "A human child," the commander replied, "nothing more." "A human child," Marcus repeated, lowering his weapon with the terrible calm of a man who had already begun planning war. "You beautiful bastards have no idea what that means." The Zephyrian ships lifted into the morning sky like dreams taking flight, carrying Sarah Chen away from the only home she had ever known. Below, the colonists of New Eden gathered in the settlement square, their faces grim with a resolve that would have surprised any alien observer. Dr. Chen stood at the center of the crowd, her medical training warring with her mother's fury. She activated her emergency beacon with hands that shook only slightly, sending a priority signal that would bounce through relay stations all the way back to Earth. "This is New Eden Colony to Earth Command." She spoke into the transmitter, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "The Zephyrians have taken a human child, 7 years old. Name, Sarah Chen, daughter of Dr. Elizabeth Chen and the late Captain James Chen." She paused, looking up at the sky where the alien ships had vanished. "They have taken our daughter. Please, bring her home." 3 weeks later, the message reached Earth. Within an hour, the Human Colonial Council had declared a state of emergency. Within a day, Admiral Sarah Mitchell stood before the assembled fleet commanders of humanity's naval forces. "They took a child," she said simply. "A 7-year-old girl named Sarah Chen. The Zephyrians of the Hegemony's Collection Corps took her from her mother's arms." The silence in the room was absolute. "The galaxy thinks we're soft," Admiral Mitchell continued. "They think we're weak because we negotiate before we fight, because we try to find peaceful solutions. They mistake our compassion for weakness." She activated the holographic display, showing the known territories of the Zephyrian hegemony. Hundreds of star systems, thousands of worlds, billions of lives. "They're about to learn the difference." Captain Maria Santos, commander of the heavy cruiser Righteous Fury, raised her hand. "Admiral, the hegemony has stood for 10,000 years. They have technologies we don't understand, fleets that dwarf our entire navy. They have never faced humanity when we're truly angry," Admiral Mitchell replied. "They took one of our children. There is no power in this galaxy that will stop us from bringing her home." The room erupted in grim nods and muttered agreements. These were officers who had seen combat, who understood the cost of war. But there was something in their eyes that went beyond military duty. Something that spoke to the deepest core of human nature. "Doctor." Chen's message played again on the communications array, her mother's voice carrying across light years with its simple, devastating request. "Please, bring her home." Admiral Mitchell looked around the room at the faces of humanity's finest military minds. "Gentlemen, ladies, we're going to war. Not for territory, not for resources, not for political gain. We're going to war for one little girl who should be picking flowers in her mother's garden." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "And we're going to burn down anyone who stands in our way." In the depths of space, aboard the Zephyrian pleasure craft Eternal Grace, Sarah Chen sat in a room that looked like something from a fairy tale. The walls were made of living crystal that sang soft melodies, and creatures that looked like tiny dragons brought her sweets that tasted like starlight. "Are you comfortable, little flower?" Veltar asked, entering the chamber with his characteristic flowing gait. Sarah looked up from the window, where she had been watching the stars. Her young face was serious in a way that should have been impossible for someone her age. "When can I go home?" she asked quietly. "This is your home now," Veltar replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "You will see wonders here that your kind could never imagine." "I want my mummy," Sarah said, and there was something in her voice that made the Zephyrian commander feel cold despite his ship's perfect climate control. Outside the crystal walls, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, and in the darkness between them, humanity's war fleets were already beginning to move. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when someone made a human mother cry. The hunt was beginning. Admiral Sarah Mitchell stood before the largest holographic star map ever assembled by human hands, watching as red markers appeared across the galaxy like drops of blood on white silk. Each marker represented a Zephyrian world, a target in what would become the most comprehensive military campaign in human history. "Intelligence report, Commander Hayes," she said without turning from the display. Commander David Hayes, head of Human Military Intelligence, stepped forward with a datapad, that contained the culmination of 6 months of desperate research. Admiral, we've identified the Zephyrian power structure. They're not like the other hegemony species we've encountered. They consider themselves artists, collectors of beauty. Their entire society revolves around the acquisition and preservation of what they deem aesthetically perfect, including children. Admiral Mitchell's voice carried the weight of winter storms. Yes, ma'am. The Collection Corps operates under the direct authority of their High Aesthetic, a being called Morden the Eternal. Our xenobiologists believe the Zephyrians may have extended lifespans measured in millennia. To them, taking Sarah Chen was no different than collecting a rare flower. The Admiral finally turned, her grey eyes holding the kind of cold fury that had made her the youngest flag officer in human naval history. Show me their collection routes. The star map shifted, displaying the elegant curves of Zephyrian patrol patterns. Their ships moved through space like dancers following choreographed steps, beautiful and precise. Each route connected dozens of worlds where other species lived under Zephyrian protection, and provided tribute in the form of their most beautiful children. They've been doing this for thousands of years, Hayes continued, taking children from dozens of species across the galaxy. The other races consider it a cost of doing business with the hegemony. The other races, Admiral Mitchell said quietly, have never been human. She activated her command interface, and suddenly the holographic display filled with ship signatures, every vessel in humanity's combined fleets. Cruisers and destroyers, carriers and assault ships, mining vessels converted to war machines, and exploration ships fitted with weapons they were never meant to carry. It was a fleet assembled in 8 months of frantic preparation, representing every shipyard and every human world. Status report on Operation Homecoming, Captain Santos. Captain Maria Santos stepped forward, her uniform bearing the scars of countless simulations and planning sessions. All fleets are in position, Admiral. Beta Fleet is stationed at the Kepler Nexus, ready to cut off their primary trade routes. Gamma Fleet holds position at the Veil Nebula, blocking their retreat to core territories. Delta Fleet, she paused, a grim smile crossing her face. Delta Fleet is already in Zephyrian space, making their presence known. The display shifted to show Delta Fleet's current position, deep in enemy territory, systematically destroying Zephyrian art installations and cultural monuments. Not military targets, but the beautiful sculptures and living artworks that the aliens prized above almost everything else. They're sending messages demanding we cease our cultural vandalism, Santos continued. Apparently, we're destroying irreplaceable masterpieces. Good, Admiral Mitchell said. We want them angry. Angry beings make mistakes. Doctor. Elizabeth Chen entered the command center, her civilian clothes stark against the military uniform surrounding her. In the months since her daughter's abduction, she'd become something new. Part grieving mother, part intelligence asset, part weapon of psychological warfare. Dr. Chen, the Admiral acknowledged, how are our negotiations proceeding? Elizabeth Chen's face had changed in the months since Sarah's disappearance. The soft features of a healer had hardened into something that could cut diamond. The Zephyrian Diplomatic Corps refuses to acknowledge they have our children. They claim their collection corps operates independently, beyond their government's control. Convenient lies, Commander Hayes muttered. Very convenient, Dr. Chen agreed, which is why I've prepared something special for them. She activated a holographic recorder, and suddenly the air filled with the sound of children crying. Not Sarah alone, but dozens of voices, human children, Altarian younglings, vegan cubs, Centauri offspring. The sound was heartbreaking, but underneath the sorrow was something else, something that made every human in the room straighten with deadly purpose. This is what I played for the Zephyrian ambassador yesterday, Dr. Chen said, a recording of every child they've taken in the last century, crying for their parents. The room fell silent except for the haunting chorus of lost children. What was his response? Admiral Mitchell asked. He called it crude emotional manipulation, Dr. Chen replied. Then he ended the conference and retreated to his ship. Captain Santos checked her chronometer. Speaking of which, that should be happening right about now.
The star map shifted to show the Zephyrian diplomatic vessel Harmony of Spheres as it attempted to depart Earth's solar system.
The beautiful crystalline ship moved with typical Zephyrian grace until it reached the edge of human space. That's where it stopped. Harmony of Spheres, this is Admiral Rebecca Walsh aboard the dreadnought Unconditional Love, came a voice over the communications array. You are ordered to return to Earth immediately. The response came in the musical tones of Zephyrian speech, translated by their universal communicators. Human vessel, you have no authority to detain diplomatic representatives of the hegemony. Stand aside. Negative. Harmony, you're not leaving until you help us locate our children. Your children are beyond your reach, primitive species. They are guests of the collection core, witnessing beauty your kind could never comprehend. The silence that followed stretched for nearly a minute before Admiral Walsh's voice returned, colder than the space between stars. Harmony of spheres, you have 10 seconds to reverse course, or I will demonstrate some human beauty for you. You would not dare attack a diplomatic vessel. 5 seconds. The Zephyrian ship began to turn, its crystalline hull catching and reflecting the light of Sol in patterns that would have been breathtaking under other circumstances. Time, Admiral Walsh announced. The dreadnought's main gun spoke with the voice of human fury. The shot wasn't aimed to destroy, instead, it carved a perfect circle through the Harmony's starboard wing, leaving edges so clean they seemed to glow. The Zephyrian ship shuddered to a halt, its perfect symmetry ruined. Beautiful work, Admiral Walsh, came the response from the alien vessel, and there was genuine appreciation in the translator's voice. Your species shows unexpected artistic potential. That was a love tap, Walsh replied. Return to Earth, or the next one goes through your engine room. Back on Earth, Admiral Mitchell watched the confrontation with grim satisfaction. Phase 2 is now active. Send the signal to all fleet commanders. Across the galaxy, humanity's war fleets began to move with purpose that had been building for 8 months. This wasn't the careful, measured advance of traditional military doctrine. This was something new. Warfare conducted with the methodical brutality of a species that had decided nothing was more important than bringing their children home. The first target was the art world of HFY, where the Zephyrians maintained their greatest galleries and cultural centers. The planet was defended by crystalline defense platforms that could have held off any conventional assault, but the humans didn't launch a conventional assault. Instead, they used mining charges. Captain Jennifer Liu commanded the converted cargo hauler Determination, a vessel that had spent decades moving raw materials between human colonies. Now it carried something different in its holds. Industrial explosives originally meant for asteroid mining, rigged with proximity sensors and timer fuses. Deploy the packages, she ordered, and her crew launched thousands of mining charges into HFY's orbital space. The explosives spread out in seemingly random patterns, drifting like metallic snow. The Zephyrian defense commander, a being called Silthan the Graceful, watched the human vessels with artistic appreciation. Even this crude attack showed a certain chaotic beauty, the way the charges tumbled through space like scattered stars. "Shall we destroy them, my lord?" asked his tactical officer. "Let them fall," Silthan replied. "Their explosives cannot penetrate our shields. Let the humans exhaust themselves against our defenses, then we shall show them proper artistry in warfare." The mining charges continued to drift, seemingly harmless. Some struck the defense platform's shields and bounced away. Others missed entirely, sailing past the orbital installations to burn up in the planet's atmosphere. Captain Liu watched from her bridge as the charges spread throughout the Zephyrian defense network. Pattern established, all ships withdraw to safe distance. The human fleet pulled back, leaving the Zephyrian defenders puzzled but victorious. They had repelled an attack without losing a single platform. Then the charges activated. Industrial mining explosives were designed to crack asteroids apart from the inside, to find the weak points in solid rock and exploit them with surgical precision. Applied to the crystalline structures of Zephyrian technology, they proved devastatingly effective. The defense platforms didn't explode, they shattered. Beautiful crystal formations that had taken centuries to grow cracked along their natural fault lines, breaking into billions of glittering fragments. The orbital defense network collapsed in minutes, its destruction creating light shows that could be seen from the planet's surface. "No," Silthan whispered, watching his masterpieces reduced to cosmic dust. "The beauty, the centuries of work, human fleet is returning to effective range," his tactical officer reported. "They're targeting the cultural centers." What followed was systematic destruction carried out with human efficiency. The galleries and museums of HFY burned under precisely targeted bombardment. Sculpture gardens that had taken millennia to cultivate were reduced to ash. The humans showed no interest in conquest or occupation. They simply destroyed everything the Zephyrians considered beautiful, then moved on. The attack lasted 6 hours. When it ended, HFY's cultural heritage was gone, reduced to smoke and rubble. The planet's infrastructure remained intact, its population was unharmed, but the soul of Zephyrian civilization on that world had been surgically removed. Captain Liu opened communications with the planetary government. "This is Captain Jennifer Liu of the Human Colonial Forces. We're looking for a little girl named Sarah Chen. 7 years old, brown hair, brown eyes, taken from New Eden Colony 8 months ago. The response came in tones of shocked disbelief. You destroyed our galleries, our masterpieces. Masterpieces. For one human child? Yes, Liu replied simply, and we'll destroy every beautiful thing in your empire until we get her back. The transmission ended, leaving the Zephyrians to contemplate the ashes of their civilization. Aboard the pleasure craft Eternal Grace, Sarah Chen sat in her crystal room, playing with toys that sang when touched. She had grown thin in the months since her capture, and her eyes held shadows that no 7-year-old should carry. Veltar entered with his usual flowing grace, but his beautiful features were troubled. Little flower, do you know what your people are doing? Sarah looked up with those serious brown eyes. They're coming for me, aren't they? They are destroying beauty, Veltar said, and his voice carried genuine pain. Masterpieces that took centuries to create, art forms your species could never understand or appreciate, all for one small human child. Sarah stood and walked to her crystal window, looking out at the stars. My daddy used to say that nothing in the universe was more beautiful than his little girl's smile. Your father was primitive, crude. He could not comprehend true aesthetic. My daddy's dead, Sarah said quietly, cutting him off. He died in a mining accident when I was 5. But he taught me something before he died. Veltar found himself leaning forward, drawn by something in the child's voice. He taught me that love isn't about pretty things, Sarah continued. It's about what you're willing to do when someone hurts the people you love. Through the crystal walls, alerts began to chime. Emergency signals in the musical language of the Zephyrians, speaking of human fleets and burning worlds. They're coming for me, Sarah said, and for the first time since her capture, she smiled. And they're not going to stop until they find me. In the distance, the stars themselves seemed to flicker with the light of human warships, drawing closer with each passing hour. High aesthetic Morden the Eternal stood in his palace of living crystal, watching holographic displays of burning worlds with something approaching wonder. In his 3,000 years of existence, he had never witnessed such beautiful destruction. The humans moved through space like a symphony of calculated rage, their fleet formations creating patterns that were almost artistic. Report, he commanded, his voice causing the crystal walls to resonate in harmonious tones. Veltar materialized in the chamber through the palace's dimensional transport system, his usually perfect composure clearly shaken. My lord aesthetic, the humans have destroyed 47 cultural worlds in the past 3 months. They show no interest in military targets, infrastructure, or strategic resources. They simply eliminate everything we consider beautiful, then move on. Fascinating. Morden mused, his silver eyes reflecting the holographic flames consuming the art galleries of Sarandal. And their losses? Minimal, my lord. They've lost perhaps 24 vessels out of several thousand. Their tactics are unprecedented. They use industrial tools as weapons, mining equipment as assault craft. They turn our own aesthetic sensibilities against us by forcing us to watch beauty die. The high aesthetic moved to a crystal wall that showed the current positions of human fleets. They had penetrated deep into Zephyrian space, their movements coordinated across light years with precision that spoke of months of planning. And all of this for one small human offspring, Morden said softly. Tell me, Veltar, what do you think of our little collector's prize now? Veltar hesitated, an emotion foreign to his species flickering across his features. The human child. She has been studying our language, our customs. She asks questions that... He paused, searching for words. She sees things we do not, my lord. Yesterday she pointed to one of our most prized sculptures and asked why we made something so sad look so pretty. Sad? The sculpture depicts the moment of a star's death, captured in eternal crystal. We consider it the pinnacle of aesthetic achievement, beauty found in destruction. But the child... She saw only the sadness of something dying. Morden turned those ancient silver eyes toward his subordinate. And what did you tell her? I found I had no answer, my lord. Before the high aesthetic could respond, alarms began to sing through the palace. The crystalline walls shifted to deep red, and emergency communications flooded the chamber. The voice of Fleet Commander Zilnoth cut through the harmonic chaos. My lord aesthetic, human forces have breached the Coral Nebula defenses. They're heading directly for the core worlds. Morden's expression didn't change, but the crystal around him darkened. How did they penetrate our nebula barriers? They didn't try to penetrate them, my lord. They went through them. Their ships have been modified with mining shields and industrial-grade armor. They absorbed the nebula's radiation and energy discharges, then continued their advance. We've never seen anything like it. On the holographic display, the human fleet moved through the deadly beauty of the coral nebula, like iron fish swimming through acid. Their ships were scarred and blackened by the journey, but they continued their advance with mechanical determination. "How many vessels?" Morden asked. "Over 3,000, my lord. They've been joined by ships from every human world. Cargo haulers, passenger liners, even pleasure craft. Some of them are held together with industrial adhesive and powered by reactors that should have failed months ago." Beltar studied the tactical display, noting the humans' formation patterns. "They're not following standard fleet doctrine. This formation, it's defensive. They're protecting something at the center." The display zoomed in on the heart of the human formation, revealing a single, unremarkable vessel. The ship was small, civilian in design, and completely inadequate for deep space warfare. Yet it moved at the center of humanity's greatest military effort like a sacred relic. "That's the New Eden's Hope," Zilnoth reported. "Personal transport from the colony where we acquired the human child. Intelligence suggests it carries the offspring's birth mother." A silence fell over the crystal palace that seemed to make the very walls hold their breath. "The birth mother," Mordun repeated slowly. "She has come personally to retrieve her offspring." "My lord," Beltar said carefully, "perhaps we should consider returning the child. The destruction of our cultural heritage has been significant." The high aesthetic moved to another crystal wall, this one showing the vast archives where the Collection Corp kept their most prized acquisitions. Thousands of chambers held beings from across the galaxy, children and young adults from dozens of species, all preserved in stasis while they were studied and appreciated. 3,000 years, Beltar. For 3,000 years we have collected the beautiful children of lesser species. Never once has a parent species responded with anything more than diplomatic protests and trade sanctions. The universe accepted this as the natural order. He turned back to the display showing the approaching human fleet. But these humans, they burn our worlds.
They sacrifice their own beauty, their own art, their own peaceful nature, all for one small offspring. Do you know what that tells me, my lord?
It tells me we may have made our first genuine mistake. Aboard the New Eden's Hope, Dr. Caress.
Elizabeth Chen stood in the ship's tiny medical bay staring at a holographic image of her daughter. Sarah's face smiled back at her from the recording, taken on her 7th birthday just 2 weeks before the Zephyrians came. 3 more worlds, Elizabeth, came Admiral Mitchell's voice over the communications system. 3 more, and we reach their core territory. How many have we lost? Elizabeth asked. Though part of her already knew the answer. 48 ships, 637 crew members. The nebula crossing was harder than we anticipated. Elizabeth closed her eyes, feeling the weight of every life spent in pursuit of her child. Sarah wouldn't want this. She wouldn't want people dying for her. Maybe not, Admiral Mitchell replied. But that's not her choice to make. It's ours. The ship shuddered slightly as they adjusted course to avoid a gravity well. Through the medical bay's small porthole, Elizabeth could see the scarred hulls of the vessels around them. Ships that had sacrificed paint and armor and structural integrity to stay with the fleet. Ships crewed by people who would never see their own children again. Admiral, Elizabeth said quietly, when we find her, when we bring her home, how do we face the families of the people we've lost? The answer came after a long pause. We tell them their sacrifice meant something. We tell them that because of what they gave, no other species will ever take human children again. Captain Rodriguez, now commanding the converted mining vessel Righteous Fury, monitored the tactical displays from his jury-rigged bridge. The former security chief of New Eden had volunteered for the most dangerous missions, leading assault groups into the heart of Zephyrian space. Captain, his communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian fleet ahead. They want to talk. Rodriguez looked at the display showing the elegant alien ships arrayed before them. Beautiful vessels that moved like dancers, even in their defensive formations. Put them through.
The voice that emerged from the speakers was musical, almost hypnotically beautiful.
Human vessels, this is Fleet Commander Zilnoth of the Hegemony Defense Corps. You have penetrated sacred space. Turn back now, and we will consider amnesty for your crimes against beauty. Rodriguez smiled, an expression that held no warmth. Zephyrian Commander, this is Captain Marcus Rodriguez of New Eden Colony. You took a little girl from her mother. We want her back. One human offspring cannot justify this destruction. Your actions threaten the stability of an empire that has stood for 10,000 years. Your empire, Rodriguez replied, should have thought of that before it made a human mother cry. The transmission fell silent for several moments, before the alien commander spoke again. We do not understand your species' attachment to individual offspring. The child is being well cared for. She is witnessing beauties that... She's 7 years old, Rodriguez interrupted. She wants her mother. Everything else is meaningless. You would destroy art that has existed for millennia for the emotional comfort of one small being? Rodriguez looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew, miners and farmers and teachers who had volunteered for this mission. People who understood exactly what they were fighting for. Let me explain something to you, Zilnoth. You think we're barbarians because we don't appreciate your art. But you're wrong. We understand beauty just fine. We just know the difference between things and people. He activated his ship's targeting systems, watching his weapons locked onto the lead Zephyrian vessel. And when someone hurts our people, we're willing to break every beautiful thing in the universe to get them back. The Battle of the Singing Stars began with a sort of violence that had characterized the entire human campaign. The Zephyrians fought with elegant grace, their ships weaving through space in patterns that were beautiful to behold. But the humans fought with something else, the focused brutality of parents protecting their children. Mining charges turned cargo holds into bombs. Industrial lasers became ship-killing weapons. Vessels held together with hope and determination rammed crystalline cruisers that had taken decades to grow. In the middle of it all, the New Eden's Hope pushed forward with single-minded purpose, protected by a wall of human ships that sacrificed themselves without hesitation. There! Elizabeth Chen called out, pointing at the tactical display. That ship, the large one with the crystal gardens. That has to be where they're keeping the children. Admiral Mitchell's voice crackled over the communications. All ships, priority target identified, clear a path for the Hope. What followed was 8 hours of desperate fighting as humanity's fleet carved a corridor through the Zephyrian defenses. Ships died in beautiful explosions of light and crystal, their sacrifice measured in meters gained toward the collection core vessel. Aboard the Eternal Grace, Sarah Chen felt the ship shudder under weapons fire. She had been moved to a secure chamber deep within the vessel, but even there she could hear the sounds of battle raging outside. Little Flower. Veltar appeared in her chamber, his perfect features marked by something that might have been fear. Your people have come for you. Sarah looked up from the crystal toy she had been holding. I know, my mommy doesn't give up. They are destroying everything. Thousands of years of culture, art that can never be replaced. You took me from my mummy, Sarah said simply. What did you think would happen? Veltar knelt beside her, his silver eyes reflecting the emergency lights that now pulsed through the ship. We thought your people would negotiate, offer tribute, accept the natural order of the galaxy. Sarah stood and walked to the chamber's window, looking out at the battle raging in space. Human ships, scarred and burning, threw themselves against the elegant Zephyrian vessels with desperate fury. That's my mommy out there, she said softly. She's coming to take me home. Through the crystal walls, they could hear Commander Zilnoth's voice over the ship's communications. Lord Aesthetic, the humans have broken our outer defenses. They're targeting the Collection Corps vessels directly. Veltar stood slowly, understanding dawning in his ancient mind. They're not trying to conquer us. They're not even trying to defeat us. They just want you back. Sarah nodded, pressing her small hand against the crystal window. And they won't stop until they get me. In the distance, the New Eden's Hope pushed through the battle, its small hull scarred but intact, carried forward by the sacrifice of ships and crews who believed some things were worth any price. The humans were coming home. The Eternal Grace shuddered again as human weapons found their mark against its crystalline hull. Deep within the vessel's most secure chambers, High Aesthetic Mordun the Eternal stood before a wall of preservation pods, each containing a child from somewhere in the galaxy. The collection represented 3,000 years of careful acquisition, the most beautiful offspring of dozens of species, preserved in stasis while they were studied and appreciated. My lord. Veltar entered the chamber with his characteristic flowing movement, though his perfect composure was finally beginning to crack. The human vessels have breached our inner defenses. They've disabled 4 Collection Corps ships and are systematically targeting our preservation facilities. Mordun moved to one particular pod, where Sarah Chen floated in gentle suspension. The human child's face was peaceful in artificial sleep, her small hand still clutching a wilted flower from New Eden's gardens. Around her, hundreds of other children waited in similar pods. Altarian younglings with silver skin, Centauri cubs with golden fur, Beings from worlds whose names were forgotten in galactic history. Wake her, Mordun commanded. My lord, wake the human child. All of this destruction, all of this beautiful violence revolves around her. I would speak with this creature who has motivated such artistic fury. Veltar hesitated. Lord Aesthetic, the human fleet grows stronger with each passing hour. Ships from every human world continue to arrive. Perhaps we should consider. Wake her, Mordun repeated, and his voice made the crystal walls sing in minor keys. The preservation pod cycled through its awakening sequence, gradually returning Sarah Chen to consciousness. Her brown eyes opened slowly, taking in the crystalline chamber and the alien beings who watched her with expressions she couldn't read. Hello, little flower, Mordun said, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. I am Mordun the Eternal, high aesthetic of my people. You have caused quite a stir in our galaxy. Sarah sat up in the pod, looking around at the sleeping forms of the other children. Are they okay? The other kids? The question seemed to surprise the ancient being. They are preserved in perfect stasis, experiencing wonders beyond their primitive comprehension. They look sad, Sarah said quietly. Even when they're sleeping, they look sad. Mordun followed her gaze to the other pods. He had looked upon this collection countless times over the centuries, seeing only the aesthetic perfection of youth preserved for eternity. But now, through the eyes of this small human, he saw something else. The slight downturn of mouths, the tension around closed eyes, the universal expression of children who had been torn from everything they knew. They dream, he said uncertainly. Beautiful dreams of their new home among the stars. They dream of their mummies, Sarah corrected. I know because I dream about mine too. The ship shook again, more violently this time. Emergency lights began to pulse through the chamber, and Veltar's face grew troubled. My lord, the human vessel New Eden's Hope has reached our outer hull. They're attempting to board us. Mordun turned his ancient gaze toward the child who had somehow brought the fury of an entire species to his doorstep. Tell me, small human, what do your people want?
They want me to come home, Sarah said simply.
And you believe they would destroy our entire civilization to retrieve one small being? Sarah climbed out of the preservation pod, her 7-year-old legs steady despite months in stasis. My mummy is out there. She's probably scared, but she came anyway because she loves me more than anything in the whole universe. Love. Mordun repeated the word as if tasting something foreign. Your species' emotional attachment to offspring. We find it inefficient. It's not about being efficient, Sarah said, walking to the chamber's viewing wall. In the distance, they could see the scarred hull of the New Eden's Hope as it maneuvered alongside the Zephyrian vessel. It's about love, and love makes people do impossible things. Through the crystal walls, they could hear the distinctive sound of human breaching charges detonating against the Eternal Grace's hull. The beautiful ship's perfect symmetry was being violated by crude human technology, but the boarders were coming anyway. My lord, Veltar's voice carried a note of something that might have been panic. They're through the outer barriers. Human soldiers are moving through our corridors. Mordun activated a holographic display showing the invading humans. They moved through his beautiful ship like creatures of metal and fury, their faces hidden behind environment suits and tactical gear. But at the center of the group was a woman in civilian clothes, protected by the soldiers but clearly leading the mission. The birth mother, Mordun observed. She has come personally. Her name is Elizabeth, Sarah said, her voice brightening for the first time in months. She's a doctor. She fixes people when they get hurt. The holographic figures moved deeper into the ship, following corridor maps that human intelligence had somehow acquired. Their progress was relentless, unstoppable, driven by something that transcended military doctrine. They're heading for the collection chambers, Veltar reported. My lord, we must evacuate you two. No, Mordun said quietly. I will meet them here. My lord? The high aesthetic looked around his collection one final time. Thousands of years of careful acquisition. The most beautiful children in the galaxy preserved for his aesthetic appreciation. And for the first time in his extended existence, he truly saw what he had built. Veltar, how many species have attempted to retrieve their offspring from our collections? None, my lord. The other species accept our superiority, our right to collect beauty wherever we find it. But the humans do not accept this. No, my lord. They seem incapable of accepting it. Mordun nodded slowly. Perhaps that tells us something important about the nature of beauty. The chamber's main entrance dissolved in a shower of sparks and molten crystal as human breaching charges opened a path. Through the smoking gap came soldiers in full combat gear, their weapons trained on the Zephyrian commanders. But behind them, moving with the desperate urgency of a mother who had traveled across the galaxy, came Dr. Elizabeth Chen. She stopped at the chamber's threshold, her eyes scanning the preservation pods until she found the one that held her daughter. The sound that escaped her throat was barely human. Relief and anguish and fury combined into something that made even the ancient Morden step back. "Sarah," she whispered. "Mummy." Sarah ran toward her mother, her small feet echoing in the crystal chamber. The reunion that followed was perhaps the most beautiful thing Morden had ever witnessed. Mother and child collapsed into each other's arms, their tears of joy creating harmonies with the crystal walls that no Zephyrian composer had ever achieved. Around them, the human soldiers maintained their defensive positions, but their weapons seemed suddenly less important in the miracle taking place before them. "Are you hurt?" Elizabeth asked, running her hands over her daughter's face, checking for injuries that existed only in a mother's fears. "I'm okay, Mummy. I knew you would come." "I'm so sorry it took so long, baby. Mummy's so sorry." Captain Rodriguez emerged from the group of soldiers, his weapon lowered but ready. "Doctor, we need to move. This ship won't stay intact much longer." Elizabeth stood, lifting Sarah in her arms, and turned to face the alien commanders who had stolen her child. Her medical training warred with her maternal fury, but when she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. "I want the other children released. All of them." Morden studied the human woman with his ancient silver eyes. "Those children belong to species across the galaxy. They cannot be simply returned." "Watch me," Elizabeth said, and there was something in her tone that suggested she had given considerable thought to this moment. "The human fleet outside includes ships from every world in our space. We have transport capacity for every child in your collection, and the diplomatic resources to return them to their families."
Impossible.
"The logistics alone, my species just crossed half the galaxy to retrieve one 7-year-old girl," Elizabeth interrupted. "Do you really want to bet against our logistics?"
Veltar stepped forward, his beautiful features troubled.
"The other species have never requested the return of their offspring. They accept our collections because they've never had a choice." Captain Rodriguez cut him off. "But now they do. Every species in the galaxy is going to see what humans did to get one child back. How long do you think your collection agreements will last after that?" Morden moved to the viewing wall, looking out at the human fleet that surrounded his vessel. Ships that should never have been able to reach this far into Zephyrian space, crewed by beings who had sacrificed everything for one small girl's smile. 3,000 years, he said quietly. For 3,000 years we have collected beauty, preserved it, studied it. We believed we were performing a service to the galaxy, maintaining aesthetic standards that lesser species could not appreciate. He turned back to the humans, his expression unreadable. "But perhaps we never understood what beauty truly was." Sarah looked up at the ancient being from her mother's arms. "Beauty isn't about pretty things," she said softly. "It's about love. And love isn't something you can collect or keep in a jar. It's something you give away." The chamber fell silent except for the distant sounds of the battle still raging in space around them. Human and Zephyrian forces continued to clash, but here in this crystal room filled with sleeping children, something fundamental was changing. "Release them," Morden commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Release all of them." "My lord?" Veltar's shock was evident in every syllable. "You heard the human birth mother's proposal. We have transport ships. They have the capacity to return these children to their families." The high aesthetic moved to the central control console, his hands flowing over crystal interfaces with practiced grace. "Perhaps it is time for our collection to serve a different kind of beauty." One by one, the preservation pods began to cycle through their awakening sequences. Children from across the galaxy started to stir, their eyes opening to see humans and Zephyrians working together to free them from their crystal prisons. Elizabeth Chen watched the liberation with tears streaming down her face, still clutching her daughter as if she might disappear again at any moment. "Thank you," she said to Mordoon, and the ancient being heard something in her voice that resonated through his crystalline surroundings. "Do not thank me, human," he replied. "Thank your daughter. She has taught an ancient being something new about the nature of beauty." Through the viewing wall, they could see human transport ships moving into position, ready to receive the rescued children. And in the distance, the guns of both fleets began to fall silent as word of the agreement spread through space. The war was ending. The children were going home. but the galaxy would never be quite the same again.
6 months after the Battle of the Singing Stars, the galaxy had learned to whisper a new phrase in 1,000 different languages: never anger a human mother. Ambassador Sarah Chen, no longer doctor, but holding the newly created position of Human Coordinator for Recovered Children, stood in the Great Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council on Nexus Prime. The vast chamber buzzed with translation protocols as representatives from 400 species discussed what had become known as the human precedent. At her side, 7-year-old Sarah Chen played with a holographic toy that projected butterflies from New Eden's gardens. The child had become something of a legend across the galaxy, the girl whose capture had led to the first successful challenge to hegemony authority in 10,000 years. "The floor recognizes the representative from Earth," announced the council moderator, a being that resembled a tree made of silver and starlight. Elizabeth stood, her civilian diplomatic robes a stark contrast to the elaborate uniforms worn by most galactic representatives. "Honored delegates, 6 months ago my daughter was taken from her home by members of the Zephyrian Collection Corps. Today, she plays with toys while representatives of 400 species debate new protocols for protecting our children." She paused, looking around the vast chamber filled with beings from across the galaxy. "But this isn't really about new protocols. This is about something much simpler. This is about love, and what we're willing to sacrifice for it." Veltar, who now served as the Zephyrian delegate following Mordin's voluntary exile, rose from his crystalline seat. "The Zephyrian Aesthetic Council wishes to formally apologize for 3 millennia of unauthorized child acquisition. We have also prepared reparations for affected families." "Thank you," Elizabeth replied. "But our focus today should be on the future." The Children's Return Protocol has successfully reunited over 12,000 young beings with their families across the galaxy. But, more importantly, it has established something new. She activated a holographic display showing shipping routes and diplomatic channels that hadn't existed before the war, trade agreements between species who never spoke before, cultural exchanges between worlds separated by centuries of mistrust, defense pacts between former enemies. Admiral Mitchell materialized via hologram from Earth Command, her image projected into the center of the assembly. "The galaxy has learned something important about humanity. We don't seek conquest or domination, we seek our children. But when someone threatens our children, there is no limit to how far we will go or what we will sacrifice to bring them home." The Altarian delegate, his silver skin gleaming under the assembly's lights, stood slowly. The human response was unprecedented. "When our own young were taken, we filed diplomatic protests. We accepted it as the cost of galactic stability." "Because you didn't know you had a choice," Elizabeth said gently. "None of you knew that resistance was possible. But the cost," interjected the Centauri representative, her golden fur bristling with agitation. "Humanity lost ships, lives, entire economic sectors converted to war production. How do you justify such sacrifice for individual offspring?" Little Sarah looked up from her butterfly toy, her brown eyes serious in the way that had become her trademark. "Because that's what families do," she said simply. "We take care of each other." The chamber fell silent. In the months since her rescue, Sarah had attended every diplomatic session, her presence a constant reminder of what the conflict had really been about. The galaxy's most powerful beings had grown accustomed to having their debates punctuated by the wisdom of a 7-year-old human child. High Aesthetic Mordun appeared in the chamber via quantum resonance projection, his form shimmering between dimensions from his self-imposed exile in the void between stars. "I have spent 3,000 years believing that beauty was something to be collected, preserved, possessed. The humans taught me that beauty is something to be protected, nurtured, and when necessary, fought for." His ancient silver eyes focused on Sarah, who waved at him with the casual friendliness of a child who had somehow forgiven her captor. "The Zephyrian people formally renounce all claims to the collection protocol. Our ships will be converted to transportation vessels dedicated to reuniting families separated by the old ways." Senator Maria Santos, representing the Human Colonial Coalition, stood from the Earth delegation. "We appreciate the Zephyrian commitment to redemption, but today's session is about more than past mistakes. It's about building a future where no parent has to watch their child disappear into the night." She gestured to the assembly around them. "The Galactic Children's Protection Accord establishes new principles that go beyond species boundaries, the right of families to remain together, the obligation of all spacefaring civilizations to protect the young, regardless of their origin, and the understanding that threats to children will be met with unified response." The moderator's crystalline voice resonated through the chamber. "The vote is called. All in favor of ratifying the Galactic Children's Protection Accord? Across the vast assembly, lights began to illuminate as species after species registered their approval. The Altarians voted yes, the Centauri delegation followed. Even the traditionally isolationist Void Runners added their agreement. When the count finished, the result was unanimous. 437 species had agreed to humanity's terms. The accord is ratified, the moderator announced, and the chamber erupted in sounds of approval that translated into music, light, and harmonics across the spectrum of galactic communication. Elizabeth lifted Sarah into her arms, the same movement that had been repeated in countless holographic broadcasts across the galaxy. "What do you think, baby? Ready to go home? Can we have ice cream when we get back to New Eden?" Sarah asked, her question broadcast to 400 worlds through the Assembly's translation protocols. "All the ice cream you want," Elizabeth promised, and somehow that simple exchange between mother and daughter carried more diplomatic weight than all the formal treaties and trade agreements surrounding it. Admiral Mitchell's projection smiled, an expression that looked strange on the face that had commanded humanity's greatest military campaign. "The fleet is ready for departure. All rescued children have been successfully returned to their families, and the new monitoring stations are operational." 3 months later, Sarah Chen ran through the amber grass of New Eden once again, chasing butterfly birds through fields that had been rebuilt stronger and more beautiful than before. The colony now hosted a permanent monitoring station and a small diplomatic facility, but to Sarah it was simply home. Dr. Elizabeth Chen watched from the porch of their new house, larger than the old one, with rooms designed to accommodate the stream of visitors who came to see the girl who had changed the galaxy. Reporters, diplomats, even children from other worlds whose families had been reunited through the protocol. "Mummy, look!" Sarah called out, pointing to the sky where a ship was descending through the afternoon clouds. It was a Zephyrian vessel, but its crystalline hull had been modified with human technology and carried the symbol of the Children's Return Corps. Veltar emerged from the ship with his characteristic flowing grace, but his movements now carried purpose rather than mere aesthetic beauty. Behind him came a group of young beings from across the galaxy, former Collection Corps acquisitions who now served as cultural ambassadors and family reunification specialists. "Sarah," Veltar said, approaching with something that might have been called affection on his alien features. "We have news. The last of the hidden Collection Corps facilities has been located. 47 more children, from species we hadn't even catalogued." "Are they going home?" Sarah asked, her 7-year-old directness cutting through diplomatic complexity. "They are going home," Veltar confirmed. "Thanks to you, little flower. All of them are going home." Elizabeth joined them on the grass, noting how the former Zephyrian commander had changed in the months since the war's end. His aesthetic perfection remained, but it was tempered now with something more human. Purpose beyond beauty, meaning beyond mere form. "The Children's Corps requests permission to name our newest transport ship after her," Veltar said, indicating Sarah with a gesture that combined Zephyrian grace with human warmth. "The Sarah Chen will serve as our flagship for family reunification missions." "Can I see it sometime?" Sarah asked. "I mean, when I'm older?" "Mommy says I have to finish school first. Education is very important," Veltar agreed solemnly. "But when you are ready, the ship will be waiting for you." Captain Rodriguez emerged from the monitoring station, his security uniform replaced with the blue and gold of the new Galactic Children's Protection Service. The former mining security chief had found his true calling in the months following the war, coordinating protection protocols across human space. "Elizabeth, we've got another situation developing in the Kepler sector. The Hegemony Trade Federation is allegedly pressuring the outer colony species to provide cultural contributions to their archives. It sounds like a new version of the old collection system." Elizabeth and Veltar exchanged glances. The human mother and the reformed alien commander who had become unlikely partners in the galaxy's new order. "Response fleet?" Elizabeth asked. "Already mobilizing," Rodriguez confirmed. 3 human battle groups, 2 Zephyrian cultural preservation ships, and a coalition of volunteers from the affected species. They'll be in the sector within a week. "And the message?" Rodriguez smiled, the expression of a man who had found his life's work. "Same as always. Return the children or face the consequences." Sarah looked up from her butterfly birds, suddenly serious. "Are more kids missing?" "Yes, baby," Elizabeth said gently. "But we're going to find them and bring them home, just like we found you." "Because that's what families do," Sarah said, unconsciously echoing her words from the Galactic Council. "Because that's what families do," Elizabeth confirmed. High above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, but the galaxy they illuminated was no longer the same.
Trade routes carried new kinds of cargo, not just goods and resources, but letters between separated families, cultural exchanges between former enemies, and most importantly, children safely returning home. The hegemony's 10,000-year reign hadn't ended, but it had been forced to evolve. The strongest military force in galactic history had learned to respect the fury of human parents. The most advanced civilizations had discovered that sometimes the most primitive species understood the most important truths. And in a small colony on the edge of human space, a 7-year-old girl played in fields of amber grass, unknowing and uncaring that she had become the catalyst for the galaxy's transformation. Sarah Chen chased butterfly birds through the afternoon light, her laughter carrying on the wind like a promise that no child would ever be forgotten, no family would ever stop fighting for love, and no power in the universe could stand against a mother's determination to bring her baby home. The galaxy had learned to whisper a new truth: never take a human child. Because humans don't negotiate for their children. They don't trade for their children. They don't accept the loss of their children. Humans come for their children, and they don't stop until they find them. In the distance, Sarah's laughter echoed across the fields of New Eden, a sound that had traveled across light years to reshape the destiny of stars. The girl who had been taken had come home. The children who remained lost would follow. Because that's what families do. Because that's what humans are. Because love, in the end, is the most powerful force in any galaxy.